what else to say. Perhaps if I just tell you a little bit about my background, but also I just want to, so two things. I would also like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all meeting today across the country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge that this week is the week in which we celebrate National Sorry Day, which recognises many of the issues that have been dealt with by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people over many years, and the harms that have been caused by successive governments and by colonisation, and hope that we are moving towards a better future with the Uluru Statement from the Heart. I'd like to just say a couple of things, perhaps. I think what is so fantastic is to have sessions like this. I was thinking about this as I was thinking about the questions that Yuzi had suggested, and thinking how wonderful it is to see so many enthusiastic early career researchers. I feel like kind of one of the pleasures of getting older is to see how your field's changed. So even though I completed my PhD relatively late in life, I feel it was actually still relatively rare for people to do a PhD in health economics, and there weren't that many of us. And so to see how many, how much the field has flourished is really great. And also the many different opportunities and the different research questions that are out there because of that. I think one of the things that strikes me about that, though, is that it means that often you may feel as though you have to specialise a lot more early in your research career and kind of develop an area of specialisation. And the reason I'm saying that is because, by way of introducing myself, I would say that's the thing that I absolutely haven't been a specialist in a particular area. I do probably have an area of research, and I'll talk about that as we go on, that is really the field in which I concentrate most of my research. But one of the things for many of us in health economics has been that we worked across a breadth of things. And so kind of, almost having knowledge in a whole lot of areas. And for someone at my stage of the career now, I would say, I can tell you what I think you need to do, but I can't necessarily tell you how to do it anymore. You need to work that out. I can't give those in-depth answers. I won't be able to tell you what the code is, and those sorts of things. So maybe I'll stop at that point, unless you'd like me to tell you a bit more about how I got to.
Yeah, definitely. We are curious to get to know a little bit more about you. So could you tell us a bit more about your university studies and early years as a researcher?
Okay, so you see, I did my economics degree at the University of Tasmania. An interesting and little known fact, maybe because I don't advertise it, is I happened to do an economics degree with an English major. I think I might be the only person who's ever done that. And it wasn't really until a little bit later that I went from thinking, oh, English is what I'm interested in, to economics being what I was interested in. I was thinking I should tell you a little bit more about that, but maybe I won't. I'll just move on. I think that was really helpful for me, but it did mean that when I went to say I'd like to do honours in economics, the director of the program looked at me and said, "Are you one of our students?" And I said, "Yeah," but I was doing a lot of English at the same time. But I guess, so what I think I've got really interested in my economics degree was in the area of applied welfare economics. That was the subject that was the most interesting to me, and kind of led to where I've ended up, in a way, because applied welfare economics, one of the most interesting areas there is health economics. And so many of the topics are around that. And in fact, my honours thesis was a cost-benefit analysis. So it started in that area. I did then move into doing labour economics. So I did a research master's that was in the area of labour economics. And I think that's probably where I sort of learnt to do more in terms of econometrics and things like that, because having done an English degree, I didn't do a lot of econometrics in my undergraduate degree. So that led, and that then led in a way to an opportunity that arose at the University of Tasmania to work, well, it didn't exactly lead, but because I was there and had this interest, to working with the Menzies Institute in the area of health economics. And again, I did some work on a cost-benefit analysis of salt removal, and hypertension, so reducing salt in the diet. So I guess that's how I got started. I then, well, perhaps is that a good place to stop at that point and let you ask questions?
Yeah. What was your PhD on?
Okay, so my PhD was exploring QALYs and the QALY model. Now, when I started, I thought the thing that I was really interested in was the issues around risk and uncertainty and things like, how do you deal with, for example, information? What's the value of information to people in the sense of for patients? So how does it change their risks and their perceptions? But quite early on, I got quite interested in how does the QALY model work? And so I thought I was going to be initially working on beyond QALYs, but in fact, I got really interested in QALYs themselves. And particularly at the time, we were collaborating a lot in the area of choice experiments with Jordan Louvier, who recently passed away, but is one of the absolute greats of choice experiment work internationally, and also Debbie Street, who works with us at Share now. And so the idea of using DCEs to explore the QALY model was where my PhD ended up. And particularly to test different aspects of the QALY model.
That's really interesting. What's something that you think you did well in your PhD that leads you to where you are now?
Okay, so I guess that there are two things for me. One of them is that working on QALYs aligned with some, with the idea of, well, how do we actually use them? And so thinking about that in terms of things like pharmaceutical decision-making. But the other part of it, I guess, was the exploring of choice experiments, because a lot of my work since then has used choice experiments. And so probably the favorite part of my PhD, and in a way it sort of sounds old-fashioned, even though it wasn't that long ago, was to explore different designs. So I know that there's amazing science that goes into design of choice experiments now. But I was kind of interested in the question of whether it was better to have difficult choices for people or easy choices. And I remember exploring this question with Jordan at the time, and he said, well, why don't you do that? And so as part of my PhD, I ended up in the overall research question, which was about testing whether the QALY model worked. I explored 3 different designs of the choice experiment. And I guess what is nice about that is that even though I would never consider myself anything like a design expert, and I certainly wouldn't try and design a choice experiment these days, I guess it gave me a feel for why design is important and what it might be doing, and for thinking about the question of what we do from a statistical point of view has to also work from the respondent point of view. And so I guess that's kind of something that I think was really interesting in my PhD and has kind of fed through into other research.
Yeah. And if you could, so that's more like a counterfactual question. If you could do anything differently during your PhD, what would that be?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
It doesn't necessarily need to be the actual academic thing. It could be other things. Probably things happened in life. But that's that's a question.
Yeah. I was going to say, in one way, I wish I'd done it quicker. Not necessarily earlier, but, you know, I did a part-time PhD, and so it took me quite a lot of years. And perhaps I, you know, I perhaps could have been a bit speedier about it. The other part of it, I think, and this would be my advice to other PhD students or to emerging PhD students, is I wish I'd been better about publishing along the way, and focusing on the publishing. So I have a joke about shame files, and I've noticed that at Share, the lexicon of shame files has become something that people use. But there is at least one paper that's a shame file paper from my PhD because I let it get too far away. And so I think, you know, the thing that I would perhaps do differently is make sure that you publish along the way.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure those advices were very valuable to our PhD students and to myself as well. Yeah, and I'm wondering, were there any experiences in your early career that drew you to the interest in what you are currently doing now? I guess the question is more relevant to how did you find your current research passion?
So I think that there's something that's intrinsically interesting about health, and health is, you know, the health system and the importance of health to people is something that that it was obvious to think about. So I'm going to refer back to that, you know, like really my interest in economics was really sparked when I did an applied welfare economics subject and thought, oh yeah, so this is really about what can we do and how can we know that we're actually improving people's outcomes. And so, you know, I guess that was the spark where you think economics isn't the dismal science, it's actually about improvement, you know, and making things better and evaluating whether we're making things better for people, and improving outcomes. So I guess that's kind of the thing that drives my interest. And so, you know, it's always around what interventions can we do? How can we know that they're working? How can we see if policy's changing? How can we know that we actually are making a difference for people?
Yeah, thank you. Let's chat a little bit about academic working life. What aspects do you enjoy the most working in the academia as a researcher?
So I think the thing that I really enjoy the most, and I'm sure other people would say the same thing, is working in teams, collaborating with people, sparking off other people's ideas, being able to contribute your ideas to a team and seeing that follow through. And then the other thing I think I really enjoy is the mentoring of early and mid-career researchers and helping people to develop their careers to finding opportunities. But also, you know, just interesting research questions, many of which you don't get to pursue, thinking, oh yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I fully understand you have a really busy work schedule. Yeah, so I'm wondering, how do you keep on top of your research area? Because, you know, there are so many research coming out each day. How do you keep on top of that amid your busy schedules and other commitments such as, you know, mentoring, supervising, and teaching as well?
So perhaps I should say that I don't do a lot of teaching at the moment, that I still feel as though I'm fairly busy, but that's not because of teaching. And I guess I have to make the confession that, and I'm sure I'm not the only person in a senior role who feels this, that it is really hard to keep on top of your research area. It's certainly, I don't have a lot of time for reading journals. The best I often do is scanning the titles and thinking, oh, that would look interesting. And it's a bit like, you know, back in the old days when you photocopied an article and felt you'd read it. And you remember you have to actually read it. Now it's like you scan the titles and think, oh yes, there's that going on. So I guess in some ways, the best way to keep on top of research is through that collaboration. So being able to talk to people about what's going on, to be willing to let other people be the experts in particular areas, and take their contributions, but also through things like reviewing, either reviewing grants or reviewing journal articles is actually a good way to sort of know what's happening, being involved in conferences. So all of those things, I think, you know, I guess part of it is having to accept that you're going to skate above some of it and not be able to go in depth into everything.
Yeah. And you mentioned collaborations a few times. I'm wondering for earlier career researchers starting their career, do you have any advice on how to establish local or international research network?
Yes, I think one of the things I would say is really take those opportunities to collaborate. I would hope that most people would have a research environment in which there are mentors or senior researchers who are looking out for collaborative opportunities for you, but it's important to take them. And one of the things that I think is important is to be a little bit open to the way that you might collaborate. In order. So an example to me would be to say, here I've got methods expertise. Can I contribute my methods expertise to a different topic area? And particularly in health economics, because, you know, the methods that you've got in one area might be just as relevant, even though your PhD might be in a specific health topic. Can you now contribute your methods expertise in another area? Or can you contribute in another way to a project? So getting involved in a project from different areas. So being open to those collaborative ideas is what I'm thinking about. Yeah, so, you know, your analytical skills in a different topic area, or your content knowledge in an area that's related to your work, but isn't, even if the methods are different. So for example.
Thank you. And do you have any tips on how to engage with stakeholders and policymakers?
So I think a couple of things. One of them is take those opportunities to do things like writing for the conversation or getting engaged, you know, take opportunities. For example, also take opportunities to get media training. Now, I know that's not about stakeholder engagement, but I think, you know, being willing to talk about your research, thinking about how to talk about your research, not in the way that's right down in the, you know, the technical detail, but being able to do that. So I know there's a few of the SHARE early career researchers here, and they would know how strongly we encourage people to do things like the 3-minute thesis competition, because it's a great way to be able to think, how do I sell my ideas? How do I engage with people who may not be content experts or methods experts, but telling them what's important about my research? The other one, I guess, is, again, take the opportunities. So get involved in committees. Doing things like this is great. Being involved in ISPOR, being involved in professional organisations helps with that. And also taking opportunities to be on committees if that arises. So looking for those opportunities.
Thank you. And as a senior academic leader, what do you think, what skills are important to achieve success in academic career?
So persistence, first of all. I think the ability to network, the ability to engage, or to think about that, to sort of be able to think at a strategic level is important, to be able to sort of step away from the detail and then think, why does this matter? What's happening? How is this research important? How is what we're doing important? I guess developing an understanding of how organisations work, how things like funding work, being able to really understand those things is important. Is that the kind of thing that you're thinking about?
Yeah. And yeah, do you have any advice on how to develop those skills? I think that's more related to interpersonal skills during their early career stage.
I think one of the things is to do as much engagement as you can, and to not be afraid of that. So looking for opportunities to present your work, looking for opportunities to talk to people, gaining that experience, being willing to speak up, being, I think one thing that I've seen that people do is kind of always being willing to speak at a meeting, to say something. So to think about what it is that I can contribute to this. That's not the look at me question, but it's the thinking, yeah, I may feel that I don't feel brave enough to ask a question, but put your hand up and ask the question, because you've got a question. Almost certainly we all tend to be a bit afraid that our question might be a silly question or an obvious question, or maybe that the person had said it and you just missed it. It's very unlikely to be true. And even if it is, it gives them an opportunity to say it again. But I think that learning to be a bit brave, it's to put yourself forward is probably one of the things that every academic has to do. And that it's good to learn to be willing to do those things. Yeah.
Thank you. I definitely can personally relate to that as well. And yeah, I have been trying to push myself out of comfort zones, to talk to people, to ask questions. And yeah, I encourage our peers to do the same as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let's chat about leadership. Because as an academic leader, you are leading a center. What do you think is good leadership?
So I think, there are lots of different models of the way that you can be a leader, and some of it I think is being willing to be a role model, but some of it I think is about being willing to be consultative, being willing to understand the process, and being able to look at things from other people's points of view. And I guess to me, perhaps the most important thing is to having a view to what it is that you are leading and why. And so from that point of view, for me, the most important thing about good leadership is trying to be a good mentor and to build opportunities for people, and to find those opportunities, to encourage them to take the opportunities, and to put people forward for opportunities as well.
Thank you. And what experiences in your early career helped curate your leadership?
I guess, some of it I think is just having to learn by doing. I don't think in any way, I don't think at any point I ever set out to do exactly what I'm doing now. But I think taking each opportunity and being willing to learn from it, and also being willing, so I am going to tell a couple of stories about myself. During my early research career, in fact, when I was doing my master's, I was a little bit lost and not being particularly well supervised. And I ended up doing a seminar that I wasn't particularly well prepared for. And we had a new academic at our university who'd come from Chicago. And I know everybody knows that the University of Chicago economists are the meanest in the world. I hope it's not here. And he did exactly that. He stopped halfway through and he said, I don't know why you're wasting people's time with this. And it was possibly the most horrible experience. But in fact, I think one of the things that was really good about that was that I learned he didn't kill me by doing that. Nothing happened. In fact, everybody in the department thought he'd been awful. It did put me off doing seminars for at least 18 months. but I got back on the horse and did it. And afterwards I thought, you know, it's not bad to have a failure experience. It's not bad to have somebody really call you out, because he was probably right in a way. And I think being able to remember that, but also being able to think back to being that person, and knowing that knowing that can happen for people. So not letting that happen to anyone else, I guess, is important. So it's good, you know, to the sort of the experience of thinking, yes, I didn't really know what I was doing. Maybe somebody else should have been helping me to actually better understand what I was doing, but I'm still here. Yeah. He's still here, by the way, and he's a much nicer person. And none of you will know him, so I can say that.
Thank you for sharing the story. And yeah, I do relate to that as well, handling feedback and criticism, and I think that's something that our peers are really interested in working on as well. And yeah, so in terms of leadership development, what advice would you give to ECRs? For example, participating in community roles, or doing some leadership programs, or just as you mentioned before, getting it by doing it.
Yeah, so I think all of those. I think most universities now have pretty good leadership opportunities, leadership development opportunities, and I'd say take part in those. So mentoring programs, if there's a mentoring program, it's great to do that. You'll certainly learn something from it. It'll be useful. It'll build your network. It gets people to know you. So there's those things. The second one I would say is, yeah, look for and take on the opportunities, whether it's just chairing a meeting or putting yourself forward to be a session chair at a conference. You know, there's nothing like just having to do it to do that. And again, I think it helps you to think about it. The other thing I think is, I give this advice to my kids as well, and I sometimes take it myself, which is to say, the part of this person is being played by X, you know, so you may not actually know what how to do what you're doing, but you just have to think, okay, I'm doing it now, and I'm going to, you know, just work it out on the way. So an example that I would give is, I had been on the economic subcommittee for you know, quite a few years before I was asked to chair it. And I really took a deep breath and I thought, I'm not sure if I can do this. I thought, yep, I do, and I will. And I think part of it was just thinking, okay, so now I'm the person who's got to think about how to summarize what's going on and thinking about those. And so in a way, playing the role until you can work out how to do the role is probably the best advice that I can give people.
Yeah. Just follow up on that. Do you have any specific advice for women?
I think the one thing, I guess, is that women tend to be socialized a lot more to think, to worry about whether they're capable of doing things, to doubt themselves. I think perhaps being aware of that and then pushing on despite it is an important thing. The other thing I would say is, it's kind of really useful to look at other women role models and what they do, and think about how they approach it, to listen to what they're doing, or the way that they think about things. So I guess kind of being aware, and then also being conscious, and this may not be as relevant for everybody, but thinking about things like making sure that you document career disruptions, making sure that you document the impact that, for example, having children might have on your career opportunities, and being clear about that.
Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned mentoring quite a few times. I'm wondering, do you have a person or you know, a couple of people who inspires you to pursue and continue the work that you do?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this in two ways. So yes, I can think of fantastic mentors throughout my career, but also I think what really inspires me is the early and mid-career researchers and the opportunities and seeing them develop. So I think, you know, I just don't think there's anything better than seeing people when they start out in a research career and go on to become experts and be confident in their own right. And so I think that is the most inspiring thing. But obviously there are people who've been fantastic mentors for me and who really have helped me in my career. And I'd mention Jane Hall as one of them. She's been a fantastic mentor and an amazing, inspiring research leader. But also Marion Haas, who I've worked with for many years. In fact, we started at Share on the same day. And Marion was just marvelous to work with and in many, many ways, partly because she'd say, right, we're just going to do this and get on with it. And then also Debbie Street, because I think, you know, I love the depth and detail that she takes to her research. And, you know, it's so wonderful to work with somebody who's got that kind of, you know, willingness to dig down and go down rabbit holes and things like that, and then come back and work with other people to see what that means.
Yep. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so given the time, I'll just ask one final question. What strategies do you use to maintain the work-life balance?
So I have other things in my life that force me to have work-life balance. So other passions and interests. Some of the people on this call will know that I'm quite involved in my local football club. And so I spend a lot of time around football fields on the weekend. And, you know, so inevitably that takes time. And I also have a real interest in some other community activities. So I'm involved in parkrun. I love to go out and do parkrun every week. And I also have a bit of a passion for doing yoga. So, yeah, so I guess I find other activities as well. And that possibly means I'm overly busy, but it also means that I can't be working all the time.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I might hand over to Stephanie to moderate the questions that our audience put in the chat.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rosalie, for that. And you see for the interview, I thought that was really, really wonderful. We have one question already posted in the chat. Paul, did you want to ask this in person, or were you happy for me just to read it? Actually, I'll just read it. Okay. As an academic in health economics, what would be a good balance of research, teaching, and other engagements? So, for instance, government work and consultancies.
So I think that that's something that is going to differ depending on what kind of area of what kind of department you work in. So, for example, most of the researchers at Share have a much higher concentration on research and service and engagement. Whereas I think if you're in a teaching department, so if you're in a standard economics department or even a department of public health, you're likely to have a bigger balance or a greater emphasis on teaching. What I would say is that it is really valuable to not shy away from teaching, even if research is your passion. Just going back to my early career, so when I the first job that I did after my degree was being a tutor, you know, so an associate lecturer. And I did that for a few years, and I taught the same tutorial every day for, you know, across the fortnight. And I think that's where I felt I really learned economics. You know, there was nothing like trying to teach something to suddenly think, oh, yeah, that's right. Now I understand it. So I think there is real value in it. And I also think it keeps the opportunities open for you in terms of, career openings, to be willing to have that mix of skills. So Paul, I'm not sure if I've said what the right balance is. I guess it's going to depend upon the individual, but I think having the willingness to do all and being open to each of those is important.
All right, great. Thanks, Rosalie. Does anyone else have any? Okay, Paul, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's me again. So hi, Rosalie. Thank you very much for that awesome. Also, UC for that awesome interview. Actually, I'm already on my last year of my PhD, so I'm already thinking about where to go. And coming from the Philippines, I think the academe in Australia tend to be very competitive, to the point that I really see a lot of people being stressed with the grants and all. So I wonder, in your opinion, so what kind of people usually excel in the academe? So are they the ones who, I mean, for example, if you are a person who likes routine or who likes is it something that you will you be enjoying the academe?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I absolutely agree with you, Paul. I think it's much more challenging to start in an academic career now than it was when I started an academic career. And I think for all of you, you've probably, I can happily say that I feel as though in many ways I muddled through. And I think it's much harder to muddle through now. You have to sort of I think people feel as though they have to be more strategic. I think so. There's not a particular sort of person. Now, I mean, we all know those people who just never stop working and who send you emails at all hours of the night, and you can't believe how much they do. And they, obviously a lot of them will be successful academics, but I think it is possible to be a successful academic with a better balance through things like collaboration, through looking for opportunities. And in fact, if you talk to a lot of senior academics, you find that they do have quite good work-life balance. And they are, they aren't assuming that they have to be able to do everything. The thing I think, though, is the thing that really is important to success is persistence, and not getting too despondent about knockbacks, because we will all have them. We will all have papers that get rejected. Hopefully you won't all have the horrible experience I had before of somebody saying, you're wasting your time. And when I think about the grants that have been the most important for me, I also know that pretty much all of them, there's very few grants where we put it in and got it first time, and it's almost like you fall over with the surprise of that. I think that might have happened once in my life. Maybe, I'm not even sure if maybe once in my life. And the grant that kind of really got me started in the area of work that I do at the moment, which is much more about measuring and valuing quality of life, which was to develop the Australian weights for the EQ5D. We put that in 4 times. I didn't actually believe it, until I went back and I thought, oh yeah, there is actually a grant, and I've had that, our most recent grant, which is an ARC grant. Again, we did it twice through NHMRC, twice through ARC. And in fact, I'll go back to that EQ5D one, because the thing that struck me about it at the end is that we really shouldn't have got it the first time, because it actually took the process of writing the grant again and developing experience to actually know what we wanted to do and how to do it. So I guess not thinking, oh, that's been rejected, that's it, but saying, no, look at it again, think about it. What is it that you're being told? How can you make it better? Is perhaps the most important thing, the most important quality to have, to be able to look at things again.
Yeah, and it definitely requires, excuse me, a lot of persistence and yeah, and I guess bravery as well, which I think are very important things for a career in academia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, Ha, you have a question? You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rosalie. I just have a question to follow up the discussion about persistent, strategic. And so just wondering, like, so this is, you know, obviously I totally agree with that. So just wondering, like, in the time, you know, that sometime in academia, there are downtime, like you said, that you put that grant for 4 times, the other one for 3 to 4 times again. So during the time that you persistent, you keep you persistent. Like, I mean, I just not sure, like, what's the strategy, or how did you do with, you know, the funding, if you don't have funding during that time, to keep your inspiration, your persistent, whatever. So I mean, there's a dilemma in academia, like, you know, like during the time you want to put in your application again and again, but you know, if you don't have any funding to fund yourself, for example, then what should you do?
Yeah, so I think, you know, start small and build. And particularly, I think for early career researchers, look for those opportunities at a faculty level that mean, or those sorts of things that might mean that you get a small grant. Because there's nothing that makes a grant stronger than having, say, some pilot data, or having something, or having a paper already published. And in fact, the one that I was just mentioning, the ARC grant, that's exactly the 2 things that we had that I think made a difference between the final successful grant and the previous one. Yes, we had some pilot data, but then when we actually had the pilot data published, I think that made a difference. So I think looking for the small opportunities that give you a little bit of funding, that allow you to do a little bit, that means that you're, you know, you've got a little bit more that you can say about the story. Things like, you know, yes, it can be a bit boring, but doing a systematic review, for example, in an area to really kind of shape the research question, to show that you've thought about the research question, that you know what's already out there. So I think there are kind of sort of marking out, and it's easy to look back and say, oh, you do all of these steps, but if you can then learn from those steps for the next time and think, yes, this is the kind of building up that we need to do.
All right, thank you so much, Rosalie. Well, that concludes the end of this career session. So we'd like to thank you for your time. And in the chat for everyone else, I have posted up the links to our the concurrent session. So choose which one you want to attend. They both look very good, so it's a tough decision. And we'll see you in a few minutes.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rosalie. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
See you.